Okay, welcome back. This is part two. It will be a little shorter than part one. So I want to keep us to about 30 minutes of video time. We talked in the last part about concepts, and I asked you to come up with three concepts and then give you instructions for your interdisciplinary activity. This is, I think, how we can capitalize on the pros and minimize the cons of interdisciplinary teaching. If we integrate curriculum through more authentic connections like concepts, we can actually teach what we want to. And I'll give you an example of that later. We want to make sure one content area does not control the others, like for the rainforest, science ran the show. And we want to launch our units together. And that's what we are going to talk about in a minute. I was fortunate to work on a team that all took a class on how to do this. And so we built one concept around connections, one unit around connections. We did one on interdependence. We did one on perspective. And when we used the same concept, and launched together. We had one class do the launch for everybody. Like I got to do the launch for all of the students when they came to language arts. We launched with the concept, and then each teacher did their own thing with the concept in their curriculum. So that was pretty cool. Let me show you how this happened in one of mine. Perspective was a concept that was really important to me. And this was actually in another class. This is in a class that I was teaching while I was getting my PhD, just to make sure that everything I was learning actually worked. So this is how we launched this idea of perspective. We came up with a definition and then compared it to the American heritage. If we were going to do it in all classes, this is how perspective ties in. Graphs and charts, these are understandings. Graphs and charts gives us a visual perspective of numerical relationships. The perspective in which a story is told affects all other parts of the story. So true. Social studies. To fully understand a conflict or an event, we must examine it from multiple perspectives. Again, so true. Scale brings our perspectives closer to reality. What? Pretty cool, huh? Okay, so that's perspective. How do we introduce that? Start with a challenge. What do you see? How many of you have seen this? So if you have seen this before, you see this is the old woman. Here's her chin. Here's her mouth. Here's her nose. It's just her face in profile. Here's her eye, her bangs. She's wearing some kind of a scarf on her head, and she's wearing some kind of a fur coat. But you can also look at it and see a younger woman. She's looking back. Right here, this is her chin. We see her in profile. This is her chin, like the side of her face, her ear, chin, eyelash right here. Because she's looking back, we can't actually see her face. Again, this is her hair. This is like a necklace of some sort. She's wearing a fancy bonnet as well. So that is, when you change the ear to the eye, it changes a lot. Most people have seen that. Not everybody has seen this. Perhaps you look at this and you see Easter Island, kind of Aztec profile, or with the nose and the mouth and the chin. Or you might see somebody wearing, like maybe perhaps an Eskimo walking into an igloo. Here's the opening. Here are his legs, his shoes, the back of his coat. Here's the fur lining his coat. Here's his arm with his mitten. I'd ask my students what they saw for this one. Almost all of them said they saw a donkey or a horse. Many of you might see, if you look even closer, you can see it's like just a donkey head with the ears. Some people said bunny. Others might see a seal or a sea lion. Actually, is probably more appropriate with his flippers up here. His little. But then I try to say, show that context can affect perspective. I'm like, now what do you see? And they're like, the donkey's drowning. So that kind of backfired. But hopefully now it looks more like a seal. Are the two pinks the same? They are indeed the same. Are the lines straight or crooked? They all said they were crooked. They are actually straight. And so all of these kind of had us, talking about this. Why might people have, because everybody was different in the class. Not everybody saw the same thing. We talked about this. We talked about how Jasmine noticed everything about everyone all the time. You didn't want her to notice. Like, it was good because she was like, oh, you got your hair cut. Or she'd be like, didn't you wear those same jeans like every day this week? Seriously, that was Jasmine. So these were our essential questions that stemmed from that kind of launch. How can we, to what extent is perspective reality? What shapes perspective, and how can we shape perspective when we write? And then we had to read Taming of the Shrew. So we talked about how perspective, like Shakespeare basically messes with our perspective through the whole thing. Here's another example. This is a challenge. The numbers at each end of the row and column give a total for the value of the fruit. Determine the value of the question mark. So there's different ways to do that. A lot of people get really crazy with it. It's not 100% hard. I'm not going to give you the trick. We'll see if you figured it out when I talk to you. This is actually Webb of Webb's DOK, not Angela Webb, but I'm sure she comes up with things that are just as exciting. This was something, Brett Johnson, I feel like he keeps appearing in here, but he came up with this example of a hook. He wanted it to be kind of more of like a connection and a challenge. And he said, okay, so we've got the Incredible Hulk, we've got Ant-Man, we've got the Coke can here. Devise a defensible theory for the ratio of the Ant-Man to the Coke can to the Hulk and be able to defend it. So they were starting to talk about ratio before they really knew, like getting into the details of it. They were experimenting with the concept of it before they got there. This is something that I did when I launched for my whole team. Pick a situation. You probably saw this in chapter 4. Pick a situation. I had them pick one of these systems, and then I put them in groups of like system choice. And then they had to illustrate how interdependence was important in their system, and they had to illustrate what it looked like, a scenario where interdependence was working the way it should, and a scenario when interdependence was not working the way it should. So for this one, the music group had like the drums get off beat and everybody else fell apart. The sports, they had somebody didn't block the defensive the defensive team didn't block the quarterback. The offensive lineman, I don't know, something like that. They didn't block the quarterback and he got sacked. So one time he did what he was supposed to and he blocked the quarterback. Everything was great. They made a touchdown. And then the second time, there was always violence with this one. In every section, that's kind of what happened. The quarterback got sacked. I don't know why, it just happened. But we came back to that interdependence thing, like what happens when it's not working? Everything falls apart. All of us were able to use that later. You can use children's books to infuse novelty. So this is something that I did with kids. This book is like, okay, so perspective. What do you think is going on here? And they would write it. Meanwhile, on the other side of the room, another group had the other side, and they were writing what was actually going on. And then they put together their two pictures and descriptions and saw that perspective was different depending on where you were, what part of the action you saw, what side of the corner you were on. This was like, describe the classroom. And then somebody who was actually inside the classroom was describing the classroom and had a very different view. Pretty interesting. And they would get together and look at that. It was all very fun. That was all from the book called The Other Side by Istvan Banyai. If his name sounds familiar, it's because he wrote this book, Zoom, which you may probably saw in 370 if you have Dr. Carbaugh. I don't know if Dr. Higdon uses it, but if you want to see it, watch this. You can just click on that YouTube kind. It's pretty cool. So I want you to think, which of these ideas for lesson or unit launches might you use or adapt? What launches have you used in the past that you could use a refresh or a retry? And that is going to be the very last part of your interdisciplinary activity. It asks you to see if you can do a launch that you could use for everybody, but if you don't have to, you can do 2 different launches for 2 different content areas if you would prefer. I'm okay with either. It's sometimes more work to do less. So it's up to you. All right. Remember, AMLE has a standard dedicated to interdisciplinary instruction. Make sure that you reference that in your management plan, that you reference AMLE when you're talking about that. And that brings us to the management plan. This is what you're doing. This is 8A and 8B. I'm sorry, pardon me. Oh no. Oh, geez, sorry. I'm not starting over. Okay, so choose 1 to 3 concepts and discuss them, how you personally would use them to unite different areas of your content, and then how you think those concepts are particularly powerful connecting to adolescent lives. Explain why and how you would use those concepts. We've seen quite a few ideas in here and read about ideas in the book as well. And then the second part of 8 is to discuss how you'll use concepts to foster interdisciplinary connections. So you can do a statement about that. You can use the same concepts above or different ones. And then you're going to just link your interdisciplinary activity into your classroom management plan. And that's 8B. So that's where you'll get credit for your interdisciplinary activity because it will serve as that part of your classroom management plan. All right, so what's your to-do list? First of all, work together to complete your interdisciplinary activity and post it in Canvas before next class. Second of all, individually compose the concept and interdisciplinary teaching portions of your management plan. That's what we just looked at here. And then read Dubé and Hockett, Chapter 8, both parts 1 and 2. Respond to the Google survey that I'm going to want to have by Wednesday of next week, where you rank your 4 strategies in order of preference. And I'll put together your groups from that. And then post your interactions to the Padlet. We're going to use that same link in the week 9 module. You can't do that until after class tomorrow, after class on Thursday, because I'm going to wait until class time on Thursday to check that to make sure I get everybody's. So this is your to-do list. I hope that you have been writing down your questions, and we will talk about them in our Zoom meeting tomorrow at, I believe we said 1:30. Now, if you guys would rather do that at a different time, get on your group meet and make a decision about what time you want to have the Zoom hangout for the next couple of weeks. If 1:30 is not a good time, if 1:30 is a good time, we'll just stick with that. And this is the most complex it's going to be. It's going to get simpler after this. This was just way too much. This is way too complex. So it's going to get easier from here on out, or at least more simplistic. I can't wait to see your faces tomorrow. I miss you. I will talk to you soon. Bye.